Sands and Councillor McAllister, and sorry, Councillor Fulton McAllister is the substitute. And that's Fulton McAllister.
Thank you, Jackie. Item 2, appointment of Vice Chair. Do I have a nomination or nominations? Councillor Giles.
Propose Councillor Driver.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Fulton McAllister. Are there any other nominations? No. So can we vote on that as a committee? All in favour? Yeah, that's passed and unanimous. Councillor Keith Driver is Vice Chair. Would you like to join me up here, Councillor? While you're doing that, we'll move on to the next item. That's item 3, public questions and petitions. Have we received any, Jackie?
No.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you very much. Item 4, declarations of interest. Does any members have any declarations of interest? Councillor Fulton McAllister.
I'm a board member for Taxation.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, we'll move on to item 5, the minutes. Obviously, these have been circulated in the papers, and I'm sure we've all had an opportunity to read that with the whole agenda. Are we in agreement with the minutes that have been posted to you? Is that agreed? That's agreed, yeah? So you nod, that's correct. That's unanimous agreed. Thank you. So we'll move on to item 6, which is the annual internal report on audit risk and fraud. Obviously, we've had a little bit of changeover, so I'm wondering who'll be introducing the report. Is that yourself, Hannah?
So yes, we've got here the annual report on audit risk and fraud for the financial year 2020-2021. Just as a reminder, this effectively is a summary of all of the internal audit work that's been carried out during the year. The head of internal audit role was filled on an interim basis, so we had Gavin Jones in post until the 31st of March. He prepared this report and draft opinion. What we've done since that point is we've just updated the report for any outstanding audit items that we had and updated the report accordingly, but there's been no change to the assurance level that was given by the interim audit manager. That assurance level was one of reasonable assurance regarding the economic, efficient and effective use of resources. And you can see on page 17 of your pack the update in regards to audit plans that details all of the items that were included in the original plan, the number of days and the audit opinion that was given to each of those reports. Any high priority actions that were identified during the year or remain outstanding are detailed in the appendix to the report. The report also gives some details on a bit more detail about the audits completed in the final quarter of the financial year and the work that's been completed in relation to risk management and business support grants.
Thank you, Hannah. Nice and concise there. So I think we'll throw it over to members for comments, just to say, obviously, some of us have been here from the committee last year, and we did a lot of work with Gavin. There's been also a change in focus away from compliance-based internal work and reporting, and also to enhance and give value back to the council as well. I appreciate the work that Gavin did, but is there any observations, questions, or points from Council Wright?
Thank you, Chair. I guess my question, I think it's probably right, it relates to risk management, and it relates to how we evaluate risks. We have a risk that covers pandemics, and what I'm interested in thinking about what we've just been through, what we're going through. Was the risk pandemic as we anticipated? Has that been in line with the reality that we've experienced? And I just think that's might be quite a good opportunity, a risk to sort of learn from how we thought about it, getting into it, and what we had to deal with. Thank you.
So I think fundamentally the organisation's done the review of this approach to risk. So I don't think we would want to go back and look at what we said about risk in
relation to a pandemic and see what the outcome is now, because we've done so many improvements in the way that we've developed that risk register. So we're looking at very different data now than we would have been back at the time pre the pandemic, because that was one of the things that Gavin really did improve on for us. And one of the tasks he's left us with is to actually embed that throughout the organisation. Fundamentally, though, we do have the COVID recovery plan, which I think quite clearly identifies the key priorities of what we need to address. And very much that is what we have seen have been our priority areas, and the action plan associated with that COVID recovery is very much showing that we had identified what the key issues were. I appreciate that was a response to once we went into lockdown and the pandemic. But I can only speak from myself personally. The pandemic was always the risk we hoped never happened. And I don't know that any organisation can probably quantify what the impact of that would be. But with what we've seen with support from central government to help us respond to that, that is what's helped us keep safe financially and actually get us to a position where we had a good positive outcome financially as an organisation, because we were able to utilise those resources to manage the risks and issues that the authority had to then face. So, and I haven't quite directly answered your question, Councillor, but I hope that gives you a bit of background.
Thank you, it's helpful. There's one point I think you made that would worry me slightly, and I appreciate the work that Gavin's done, that's necessitated a rethink. I think it would worry me slightly if organisations we went through a period of resetting the baseline periodically, because I think we do, I know things have moved on a lot, but I think it is important that we do look back to pre-resetting the baseline from time to time, just to get an understanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think it's an interesting point to bring up, and my memory may not serve as well as I would hope it would be, but I think that when it was in the risk register pre this pandemic, it was based around sort of a flu outbreak. So I kind of take your point that even when you actually have a risk built in, actually might turn out to be quite different to how you envisaged it. So nobody could have seen how this COVID would have played out, but even the mitigation we had in place before was not ready for this type of pandemic, but nor would any council would have been ready for a new disease and the impact. So it's an interesting point to revisit. I think it's worth noting that. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Giles.
Thank you. I was going to ask for an update on the outstanding high priority recommendations for the internal audit related to information security, GDPR, and contract management in-house.
So the service areas are updated in the final comment status and comments in regards to the applicants. That is the latest updates that have in the service areas. I would suggest with any other specific points we want to follow up and ask those.
I was specifically thinking about the about three state agreed action date at July 2021, whether or not we're on course to achieve them by the end of this month, or whether they're likely to be extended.
If you don't want to share, I'll approach the service lead on that and get you a written update after the meeting.
Thank you very much. Could I just add that obviously if that has been put back, it would be good to just have an explanation as to why it's been put back as well. But Councillor Driver next, followed by Councillor Hayes.
I just have one small question. On page 18, number 20, the order of work, we got the high, medium, low risks. Can I just ask what they were last year? I know we got 140, 34. What were the figures last year? Have they improved? Have they got worse? Did someone just give me the numbers? Because what's the point of putting the numbers down here if they really don't meet the year before?
Maybe also I'll jump in. If you don't have those, you could provide those perhaps to Councillor Driver. But also to add to that, your point, Councillor Driver, would be that you're saying, is this something that's are we having more incidents or less incidents?
Well, is this time or not? I mean, 14 region time with something we might only get two last year. That's like chances gone right down. I know that we got one less insurance on our audit report this year. It's gone down to refund or satisfaction or something already. So how should it be well that next year we can end up another more?
Well, I think Hannah can come back on, but what I would probably add is if you're doing good work and you're uncovering the issue, you may find more. But I'll let Hannah talk.
Obviously, your feedback on how it compares to previous years, but I would look also, the recommendations aren't necessarily about finding, they're looking at how we can improve some of those control processes and tighten things. So, I think the fact that we're not getting high priority things coming through, suggesting there's no significant issues, is that how we can tighten those controls. And actually, I think given the context and council's been operating in for the last 12 months, actually, the findings that are coming out of the internal audit are positive in terms of there hasn't been, lapses in this control environment during COVID. I think in relation to the level of assurance, there was a change in the levels and the terminology using. So actually, it's not a movement necessarily; it's just a different word that we've been using as well as we've seen in the last 12 months.
Yeah, just as point of clarity, wasn't it outstanding good, and so now we're at the reasonable is the same as good. So actually, where the previous year's report we had dropped, that's actually gone back up with reasonable value. Councillor Hayes? Yeah.
It's on two questions, one of which was on page 17 of the audit plan. I'm not entirely sure what reasonable, substantial, limited, etc. mean. Because I'm sure it makes perfect sense in audit terms, but to me it doesn't entirely.
Appendix B gives you the explanation.
Appendix B, I didn't find that, sorry, I'll read that instead. My other one was on the equalities to duties, it was on page 20. It's obviously quite concerning, I think, that we weren't in compliance with statutory provisions there. It does seem like we've got a reasonable plan going forwards, but I wanted to know what the deadline date was to sort of enact that. And I can see that we've enacted the high importance one already, but I'm obviously concerned that we're not hitting our statutory things there. It would be really good to have some clarity about the time scale to make sure we're hitting them.
Yeah, obviously that action plan has been reduced and that will incorporate timescales when we can update when we get responses.
Thank you. I think it's also worth mentioning the council got a great did highlight that at our last meeting, and we did look to investigate that and see where we were at that point. I think maybe to add on those points, Hannah and Councillor Haynes, would be to say that I think we would be interested to see that action plan and not just to receive an update, because of the issues that were there, and that it is an important area of the work that council does. So could I request that we actually get to see some of that action plan? Thank you. Yes, council.
Can I just ask one more, that's on page 21, the annual report is corruption. I see there was only one whistleblower issue raised, there was only one money laundering issue raised, where the money laundering one was put to the National Crime Agency. What worried me is which did not require a detailed investigation. The whistleblower one, we could at least assist all the work, that did not have a specific investigation. How bad are they got to be to have an investigation? I thought money laundering, you give the information to the National Crime Agency. That sounds quite bad to me. We never done any investigation about why and why was this happening. Well, someone must have found it. It was money laundering, somebody. So why wasn't there an investigation done? And what's got me serious enough to actually trigger one?
I can't talk about the specifics of this individual case, but fundamentally we have a responsibility to report to the National Crime Agency. Having actually worked through one of these previously at another authority, you get very limited information back, and it's only if they want you to take positive action once you've highlighted a concern, then you take further review and look into it. But fundamentally, once we we've identified a potential issue and had to do the formal reporting. It's then down to the National Crime Agency to come back to us and notify us whether we want us to do any further work or whether it has actually triggered something that's linked to information we already know about. But unfortunately, it goes to the crime agency, and it's only if you then need to take action do you hear anything back. So it does feel like a bit of a black hole at times, but as long as we completed our statutory responsibility in reporting that, there isn't much more we can do about it, because we have to rely on them to give us more information about whether it does fit into the categories that we need to investigate further.
Thank you for that, Annabelle. Just looking around and see if there's any other points at this stage. I'll just pick up a couple of them.
Sorry.
Matthew, please clarify.
So I'm a little bit disappointed to hear that we would only act if they felt there was if the National Crime Agency instructed us to act and it fell into their criteria. Because there's, and I don't know if I've misunderstood, but obviously if there were concerns around money laundering, I don't know if this is an allegation with regard to a member of the public that we had concerns about, or if this was an allegation towards a member of staff, for example. But obviously, we would be able to follow our own internal HR processes if it was a member of staff, and I don't want to get into the individual case. But I do think that it would be appropriate for us to fully investigate if it were something completely internal to Norwich City Council. If it was with regard to a member of the public and we did have any ability to investigate, then I still don't feel why, as good citizens of Norwich, we would not consider investigating and presenting all of those details to the National Crime Agency for further information. My background is as a trade union official in schools, and while, for example, the local authority designated officer may guide and instruct schools on when to undertake investigations into matters of child safeguarding, their hands are not tied by whether the ladder allows that investigation to go ahead or not. They can choose to do their own investigations, and I would hope that we would be able to take a similar stance. Just because we're not instructed to and take statutory expectation that we do, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, can I just clarify? I didn't want to imply that we don't do an investigation, because before you get anywhere near going to the National Crime Agency, you have to have done your own investigation. But what this is saying to you is that that work was done to get to the point where we reported it, but we had no request to do anything further. There will always be an internal review before we get to that stage of reporting. Whether it's an individual or a member of the public, we will follow our own guidance and ensure that we're managing in accordance with that. But without, no, I'm not going to give an example, because the reality is there will be circumstances where we can't legally do anything other than manage our processes, and we have to rely on the crime agency to have further information before we do anything different. But I want to give you assurance that we do manage with our own governance and do the internal reviews that we need to do.
Sorry, if we feel the National Crime Agency has taken an incorrect decision on that, do we challenge that through their complaints process and escalate that?
Honestly, I've not needed to be involved in it here, so I'm not clear, but I would assume we would if we felt that strongly about it. But the reality is it's very difficult to go beyond the. It's very systematic the way it works, and they also use all that data to match across and then come back to us. So again, I've never had to use a complaints process, but I'm sure we would if we had concerns about it.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question and response and clarity on that. So just really briefly, obviously, we've got the reasonable level this year, but that is caveated in point 14. The opinion is caveated by the need to fully embed the risk management processes across the council, as Annabelle put forward. So that's a challenge for CLT, and you know, we'll stay abreast of that, and we'll be aware of that. So and also we'll be, you know, appointing ourselves an internal audit, and so they've got a lot, you know, work to do to support the council, and you know, it's important to highlight that, you know, largely everything has come back through compliance. You know, we had, you know, limited on contract management waste services, and we looked at that through the year. That was a concern, and you know, it has led me as limited to say that, you know, I am concerned about how that would impact across different contract management, and I know that we'll be doing work on that this year, and other contracts, etc. Policies and procedures, again, it's limited. Again, it's something that I made quite clear in the last meeting, in the minutes, that I think it's something that we need to be looking at this year. Effectively, that underpins everything, whether, you know, how often they are reviewed and how they fit the purpose. So we'll be looking forward to seeing that work come in the next year. Yeah, you know, I've just, you know, risk management, you know, just to say, you know, to pick up a little bit of counsel right there, you know, the risk register, as Hannah said at the beginning, you know, will be coming to us twice a year. That's just now fixed and fitted. It came more in the past, we had it less, but twice a year seems to fit, particularly when it's going quarterly to the management team. So we can have a good look at that at the right time, I would say. And follow up of audit recommendations, point 43, it says the timely implementation of internal audit recommendations has been identified as an area for improvement across the council. So we've come back today, we've seen that some dates have passed, we don't know if those implementations have happened. There's still an action plan to be drawn up, so I do think that that's quite poignant, because we still yet to see that really fully transpire. So let's hopefully see if we do have outstanding work from recommendations from all the work this year, that they are quickly acted upon. So we'll keep that as a watching brief. So I think that is all I want to say on it. And so to close the item, and just to confirm to ourselves that we are, it's recommended that the committee considers the annual internal report and opinion, noting the work of the internal audit team. And I think we've truly done that, and our thanks was on record to Gavin for the work he did under difficult circumstances and helping address risk management and implementing the process. And I look forward to working with the new internal audit team to build on that and to accelerate that and improve it even further. Okay, thank you. So we'll finish that item. And we will move on, to item 7, which is the draft annual governance statement 2021. I'll hand over to Office in a second. Just to remind members who were with us last year, we did have quite a big focus on the annual governance statement. It was work that Gavin did undertake. We did make a set of improvements to the document. We made some of our own recommendations, but I think that's a good point to hand over to officers. Hannah will take that.
So you have here the draft annual governance statement for the year 2021. Just a reminder, it's a statutory requirement on us to produce this document, and it details and assesses the governance and control arrangements that have been in place at the council during the year. It also identifies actions and areas of improvement, and they're set out in an action plan in the report. It's also been a year of a lot of changes, and the report reflects some of the challenges of COVID and how they've been addressed through the governance arrangements, and the introduction from the leader and the chief exec is also quite a good summary of some of the control improvements that have been implemented during the course of the financial year. And as I said, the action plan at the end has been developed in discussion with the corporate leadership team to identify those areas where further improvements can be made, and we'll continue to track those as we go through the year and update continually.
Thank you, Hannah, and I'll look to members for any comments. Okay. Well, just to touch upon it, you know, as I said at the opening, I think we did quite a bit of focus on this. I think the action plan, you know, is helps support the document, helps to show the travel direction of the council, and it also shows, you know, a fresh approach from senior management to improve the council's performance and to have the right sort of checks and balances in itself. So, you know, I welcome the document, and I'm quite happy to finish there if there are no other comments. I mean, all I would say also is that, you know, as Hannah pointed out when we were speaking about it, this is a front-facing document that goes out to the public, and I think it's quite clear. I think it sets us out quite reasonably. I think people can engage with it well, and so I think it's a good reflection of the council, and so that would be my view. So the recommendation, I presume, is to endorse those. There is just a note. Yeah, that the committee is asked to consider if the AGS is consistent with their own perspective on the internal control within the council, plus the governance issues and actions. So I think we have considered it, and I think we can close that out and move on. So thank you. So we'll move on to item 8, and this is the draft statement of accounts. I'm sure you've all been reading this for days and weeks, and yet again, I do want to thank officers for getting this produced to the time frame, the strength of the narrative report, and also direction to the notes, and obviously we'll look at figures in a minute, but it's also credits to the management of finances and of the council that under the extreme circumstances of the last year, that we have produced a statement of accounts which you know, are balanced and I'm sure will stand up to the rigours of external audit thereafter. So I'll hand over to officers.
So yes, what we've got here is the draft set of accounts. We will be doing some final checks on these with the anticipation of be signed by Annabelle on Friday 1 later this month. So it meets the statutory deadline to get those up on this website for the end of July. This obviously is not the only chance for the committee to review the accounts, and they'll come back to committee following audit later in this financial year. As in previous years, we managed to hold a session with members to talk these through in more detail and offer the opportunity just to refresh our understanding of how the statement of accounts fits together. I thought it might be useful just to go over just the very key elements of the report and the numbers. Just in terms of the format, so the first part of the document is the narrative report. This really is sort of the descriptive element of the document, and it's designed to give you an understanding of the council, what its strategic priorities are, the sort of local and national context the council is operating in, and it also reflects on the impact that COVID-19 has had on the council, in particular its finances. It also draws on the council's medium-term financial plans and some of the key risks you would also see in budget papers in February. It gives an update on the council's financial position, its KPI performance for 2021, and also provides you with a key a guide to key features of the main financial statements and just talk you through some of those key numbers. The narrative report also provides with details of the capital and revenue outturn as it's reported to Cabinet in June. So some of those numbers and variances will be familiar to you. Just as a reminder before we look at the statements in a little bit more detail, we produce an outturn that is based on international financial reporting standards. That includes a lot of accounting adjustments, which are sort of notional and non-cash adjustments, things such as property revaluations. Under the world of local authority accounting rules, however, we're able to reverse out all of those sort of accounting transactions so that we get back to outturn figures which actually represent the impact on council's reserves and ultimately what the council taxpayer funds. It's just worth keeping that in mind as we look at the statements, because we have sort of one set of numbers which is sort of true accounting position, but we then adjust those to get back to the reserves position. So the first of the primary statements that you see in the document is on page 108 of your pack, which is the comprehensive income and expenditure statement. This is the summary of the sort of financial performance of the council during the year. And this is based on accounting standards, so this includes all of those adjustments we talked about that are non-cash, so revaluations, depreciation. The first section at the top shows you the cost of services, and you'll see there that we have moved to a surplus position of 1.4 million compared to a deficit position of 18 million in the previous year. What's driving the majority of that movement is valuations on our HRA properties. So as you can imagine, we have a huge portfolio of capital dwellings, and they undergo an annual valuation process. We reflect the results of that here. And although it looks like a large swing because of that revaluation, you need to bear in mind the size of the asset base that we're talking about. We have around sort of 750 million pounds worth of assets, and actually that movement is relatively sort of minor in the context of the asset value. As you move down the statement, you'll also notice that our finance income and expenditure has moved from the previous year. That's a better position, less expenditure, and that's driven primarily by the impairment losses put through in the previous year in relation to the loan and growth generation limited. So that pushed up the costs in the prior year. Another item to have a look at is around the taxation non-specific grant income section. You'll see that our government grants, our non-ring-fenced government grants, have increased significantly from the previous year. And that really is in relation to the COVID situation. So we received some grant funding to support the council. We also received grant funding to compensate us for the reliefs the central government announced in relation to business rates. You'll see the line above around non-domestic rates. That figure has moved into an expenditure which you wouldn't normally expect to see. It's that as an income line. And that's because whilst we've lost out on the cash coming in from businesses, that's coming back in terms of grants. So you're seeing sort of offsetting position between two lines there. So that's one of the sort of the key features of the comprehensive income and expenditure statement. The next one to just reference is on page 110 of your pack, which is the movement in reserve statement. Just as a reminder, this statement effectively is taking you from the reserve balances that we held as a council at the beginning of the financial year, how the outturn for the financial year is impacted on those to give us the revised balances at the end of March 2021. You'll see from that the general fund reserves increased by just over £500,000 to 9.98 million, and that's in line with our interest assumptions and the outturn report that went to Cabinet in June. The HRA reserve, you can see, is increased by 9.4 million to just under 43.4 million, and obviously that investment will come through as we invest in new and upgrading council stock in future years. The only other figure just to highlight here, you can see in terms of the general fund earmarked reserves, they have increased significantly from 20 million to 35 million, sorry, from 40 million to 35 million at the end of the financial year. This again is related to the impacts of COVID and particularly business rates. So we received grants, as I've mentioned, to offset the impact of business rate reliefs given as part of the COVID response. The way that the collection fund works, however, is that loss that will come through because we receive less cash from businesses will feed through into the next financial year, but the grant money we receive came through in this financial year. So what we're doing is we're setting it aside in an earmarked reserve that will come back again next year to offset deficits from business rates in the collection fund. Again, it's just different ways of accounting that we have to incorporate, but so that driving that increase, you'll see that drop down again next year to utilise that grant to fund the deficit. The balance sheet is on page 109 of your pack. Just as a reminder, this really provides a snapshot of the council's assets and liabilities at a point in time, so 31st of March. And you can see that we have a strong position with net assets of £706 million. Seeing slight increases during the year in relation to our plant, property and equipment, which is valued at £953 million. And that movement includes additions, disposals in the year, as well as valuation adjustments and depreciation charges. We also have long-term investments, and they reflect the equity investment that the council has made into Norwich Generation Limited, Norwich Services Limited, and also the legislative companies. You'll see an increase in long-term debtors. That's partly due to higher loan balances with both Norwich Generation Limited and loans to Norwich Services Limited to support the startup company. If I move down into sort of current assets, probably the biggest movement you can see there is around short-term debtors. Again, COVID impacts coming through here. So the increase is mainly due to the debtor from county council and central government. Because of the deficit that we have on business rates, effectively the other precepting authorities owe us some money back, and that's showing as a debtor at year end. And then if you move down into short-term creditors, another impact of COVID is that large increase you can see in the creditors balances, going up to 71 million. So again, this is about the grant money that we've had in to stabilise our cash flow during the year. We were compensated for both our share of business rates release, but also the county and central government share. That was done so that we could still make payments out as part to our preceptors. But actually, not all of our grant to keep. And as the deficit comes back in from the precepting authorities, we need to repay that grant to central government. So it's really just sort of moving some of the money down, but what's resulting in some what might look like strange movements in both our debtors and creditors balances. Another item that's sitting in creditors at the year end is any of the business support grants that the council were administering, any amounts that haven't yet been passed on or spent or passed on to businesses, we're showing as a creditor at the year end because that's not our money, we're effectively just passporting that through. So that shows as a creditor back to central government. I think they're probably the key things to note on the balance sheet. The last of the primary statements is the cash flow statement. Just as a reminder, that's just taking us from our own cash position, the movements during the year to our closing cash position, just to reconcile a movement in cash balances. Just other notes, probably just to highlight to you, note 41 is our going concern note. Obviously, given the situation with COVID, it's going to be an area focused on short demand as part of the audit. We again got an expanded disclosure, just detailing some of the impact of COVID, what that's meant in terms of impact on our balances. The good news obviously is the grant funding that came through, along with the short-term savings the council made last year, and didn't need to draw down on many of our general reserves. That's obviously a good position, but the risks around COVID continue. But we just disclosed that in that note, but we're confident obviously it's appropriate to prepare the council on a going concern basis. Just to highlight to you note 4 as well, which is another key note, the details of the assumptions and the areas of estimation uncertainty in the accounts. Obviously, there are a lot of estimates that go into making up the accounts. We've got valuations, we've got pension liabilities, and that note is quite a useful way of just understanding some of the significant areas of where that uncertainty sits and any impact of COVID on those. Just to touch on the group statements very quickly, obviously in previous years, group statements have been a consolidated position of Norwich Generation Limited and Council. This year it also incorporates the results of Norwich City Services Limited. The company obviously is only in sort of its setup phase during the financial year, but to make sure we've got the procedures and processes in place, we've elected to consolidate it this year, even though it's not material in the context of the accounts, because we know it will be material next year. We set that process in place this year. So that's a slight change to the financial statements. We'll leave it there if that's works. I know Dan wants to add anything. But,
yeah, I think I just want to say thank you on behalf of the whole organisation now to get us to this point. I have to be honest with you, it was a big challenge and harder this year to get the accounts drafted. I took a positive decision not to give the training before tonight though, and obviously Hannah's given you a good overview of the context, because this is an information sharing the draft at the moment. You won't actually need to approve the accounts until they've been audited, because of the challenges EY have with resourcing, and you're aware that they won't be starting their audit until November. So I just wanted to be open with you. Ordinarily, we would have done a training session before tonight, But we've chosen not to do that because it's a big time gap between training today to actually approving the accounts in November. So we will come back to you because there are some very big changes and very big numbers again. I think it just shows the challenge of what the councils had to address in this financial year. The fact that you can see those big swings in the numbers as well and how it impacts us on our INA account and our balance sheet. But it just kind of consolidates what we've had. But it is a very big positive for myself that actually organisationally everybody who manages resources has had to work with us to be able to do their management of accruals, etc., for us to be able to produce these set of accounts. And Hannah and the team have just worked tirelessly to get us this document for you to see tonight, and that's a real positive. We met our statutory deadline, but as you are aware, we won't be able to bring back the audited accounts until after that statutory deadline has passed, sadly, but you're fully aware of that from the briefing not previously.
Yeah, we'll be talking to Mark shortly about extending audit plan and time frames. I think Councillor Kendrick come in at this point.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd just like to thank very much our officers for the excellent work that they've done over the last year, especially with regards to these accounts. And these are also, as has been pointed out, draft accounts that haven't yet been externally audited. But I think we must all recognise that the last financial year was an exceptional one. I certainly can't remember in my lifetime, but certainly in my working lifetime, 8 years really comparable to this. So obviously the figures are very different from previous years.
Yes, no, thank you for that, Councillor Kendrick. And it is worth noting, as Annabelle just said, is that it's been produced before the end of the month, and that's a tight time frame, and it is. I feel frustrated that the process of external audit and finally signing off the accounts will come so late in the year and so close to budget setting again. But we'll take that out in a minute. But I think it's only right to throw it to members now. So, Councillor Driver.
Yeah, not a big piece in here, is it? Staying and do all the government on you. That sounds like a bit moneyball to me on 20 organisations. So that seems really weird how that's happened or what. Just off that. But is there any figures in here which worry our auditors, which stand out in UHCB? Well, perhaps we all just look at this because that's a bit worrying for.
Well, maybe I'll jump in and say that the next item we've got, looking at the external plan, and obviously from reading that document, the markets are quite clearly where we're looking at like very concerned assumptions and some of the issues around the financial pressures and the medium-term financial strategy. So I don't know if Mark wants to comment on that question, or we could just maybe we'll be more informed after the next item. Any other members wish to comment at this stage? Well, I'll just jump in. I mean, I think it's absolutely first and foremost. I'm sure everyone on the committee reiterates what Councillor Kendrick said and I said about thanking the team for actually working in an extremely pressured year, with remote working and not knowing whether or not the government would be true to their word and support local authorities, and having all those unquantifiable variables in terms of income, being unknown throughout the state at the early stages, and whether or not we would be, I'm sure like a going concern, and whether or not we would work out, or whether or not we would have to use a lot of reserves just to keep going. But again, as I said at the beginning, I thought that the draft statement, the narrative report was excellent, and I think it's fair what Annabelle says in the respect that this is an exceptional year of figures, and it's not simple to follow in a normal year. But I think where we've shown that we've earmarked general fund reserves in order to be able to pay out effectively, but receive in this financial calendar, it's proven the right thing to do. Yeah, just going to go through my notes a little bit for a second, but yeah, see which ones are the most relevant to us. Yeah, no, so anyway, so the earmark reserves, I think it's a prudent way forward. I think I know as well that, the financial settlement covered only 21-22, with the government implementing a roll forward finance settlement. This means at least a 1-year delay to the longer term local government financial reforms. Anyone who's been on this committee for enough time to, any financial aspects of the council, this is tremendous frustration. I suppose the government had an excuse this year, but we need certainty around our medium-term financial strategy. I think the document is very honest here. It goes on to say, consequently, the forecast for 22-23 onwards in the MTFS are not to be taken as robust figures, as they are largely based on the current status quo continuing, particularly considering how much business rates income the government allows the city council to retain in the future. So, and it goes on to point 6. The medium-term financial strategy for the general fund shows that forecast income is insufficient to fund forecast expenditure over the next 5 years. It's very clear, very upfront, the challenges that the council are facing. Obviously, there is, I'm surprised that Councillor Kendrick hasn't come forward and pointed out that the council holds 103 million in investment properties, and that accounts for 14% of the general fund's gross expenditure budget for 21-22 will be funded from the commercial income. So again, it shows that this council investing prudently and sensibly will generate an income to support services. We can add environmentally and ecologically, we might even be getting there, but that's just a personal opinion. The council currently has £75 million of cash holdings and short-term investments, and will therefore need to borrow externally at some point to fund the capital financing requirement. So again, we've got borrowing and we've got capital financing requirement, and we have the treasury management documents that kind of sit behind that, kind of set the prudent levels for that, and we as councillors get to comment and debate on that at budget council. We're here to make sure that those systems that are put in place are effectively, robust and adhered to. So, I think appreciate that we are in a financially difficult place and borrowing even at the lower rates, and our inherent debt and our intergenerational debt is only increasing. It was interesting to see at the corporate finance committee yesterday at county, and I think the borrowing is now at £1 billion. That's how much they owe. A different council, a different size, but there does seem to be a drive down now in terms of savings and efficiencies. And the Cameron was very adamant to point out those cuts, but to curtail perpetual borrowing. So I think that's important message for councils. Obviously we can make on repayments and but intergenerational debt. So let's hope that the government or a government of a day will finally adjust the funding of local authorities. I think I should silence myself. But the financial risks there, the council's corporate risk register. It's been a lot. We've got a lot of work there, and those risks are there. You've got the council funding medium to long term, commercialisation, including Norwich Generation Limited, and joint venture contracts. So, in commenting on the figures, I see the changes. I think it's prudent to do the earmarking, and we did need that central government money because we are relying on income generation, and a lot of our income streams, like many in the commercial world, just evaporated overnight. So I'd like to thank officers for that, and we've duly noted and considered the report. Are there any other comments from members? Councillor John?
Thanks. Firstly, just to echo what councillors King and Price said about thanking Anna and all the team for their fantastic work producing these full statutory deadlines. I was only going to highlight very quickly on page 89 of our agenda, page 15, the accounts, and general fund, how the money was spent, general fund, where the money came from. I think they captioned it the wrong way round.
Diagrams.
The captions to the two diagrams. And then on page 88 of our agenda, page 14, the accounts, second bullet point, it says £1.21 net reduction rental income from current tenants and tenant investment properties, which would also be wonderful, but just to know the answer. I'm just being pedantic, but I thought I'd just highlight them as a service.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Steve.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Apologies for my late arrival. I'd also like to thank the officers for an excellent report. I have a question, and apologies if you have covered this, but I was late. And it's about the general fund and the highlighted £11.8 million of gross savings need to be covered over 4 years. Are there any savings or other means to cover this that have been identified to date that you can share with us today, please?
Just so councillors are aware, we're just about to kick off our initial review of opening briefs. So we got a new corporate planning cycle that's been published and shared with the whole organisation. And fundamentally, at the end of this week, we're expecting submissions in from services that give us the high level overview of what the options may be. And we'll be reviewing those and feeding back to members at the cycle as we feed through to the formal cabinet report in November. But yeah, we started that. There's nothing I can share particularly with you today. But following some of the decisions that we've taken recently at cabinet, and I'll be mindful of how I share that information at audit. Some of it was below the line in its reporting. There are some options that are already being considered that will help us address that gap over the medium term. But fundamentally, those decisions have kind of been taken in private because they're commercially sensitive, but there are some decisions in those papers from cabinet last week that actually fundamentally really help us move towards closing that gap in the near term. But we still do have the challenge over the medium term. But yes, there is some positive stuff that we've already identified. And obviously, once we get the open briefs back in from all services this week, we'll be able to talk about that in more articulate ways to what the options are we're considering.
Okay, thank you. That's very sure.
Right, thank you very much. So, no other members indicating. Just quickly on figures, it was just over £3 million reduction in car parking income during that year, and we had a 1.2 million net reduction in rental income. So, one comment on that is that we don't know what will be like post COVID and what the new normal will be. So, I think it's important that officers keep on their toes and diversify revenue income moving forward so that we don't have too many eggs in one basket, because we won't be able to always rely on the government to bail us out of that situation, post pandemic. So the recommendation that's committee reviews the draft statement of accounts. I think we've had explanations from Hannah. We can see where the money has moved and prudent storage of money, and you can see some of the impacts of COVID and of access officers for producing this draft statement. So I think that we can close that item. Agreed? Yeah, thank you. And so that moves us perfectly and timely on to item 9, which is the annual external audit plan 2021 from Mark. Which is coming, Mark.
Well, good afternoon. So this plan builds on the discussion we had with the committee back in March, where we outlined our indicative thoughts about audit risks and the audit plans to set out where we believe there are risks to us giving an incorrect audit opinion on a set of financial statements, and therefore where we need to undertake procedures to gain sufficient proof of audit evidence for that audit opinion. So, in essence, being professionally sceptical, I don't believe any of the numbers in your accounts today. I might do come January when I get to sign, but as of today, I don't believe any of them. But we do have a concept of materiality, so we are working to a materiality level, which is set out on page 240 of your pack of £3.449 million. And that is on the same basis as we had last year, so we have a consistent basis between years. And then we will report any audit differences, both adjusted and unadjusted, of £172,000 to the committee when we report at the end of the audit. Our audit risk summary on pages 237 to 239 in summary does build on Councillor Dryer's point of where we think the accounts are more likely to be wrong, or where we need more assurance that they're right than others. And as a committee, anything that's coloured yellow is consistent with last year, so in a year of uncertainty, I think that's a big message for you to have in there, more yellow than there is red. Anything that is red is a new risk this year, and all of them relate to the impact of financial reporting consequences of COVID-19, and pretty much all of the big balances that Hannah called out when she was introducing the financial statements, so the impact on the IE account and on the balance sheet. The things like accounting for government grants, you receive a lot of government grants, but they all come with different conditions attached to them about whether you need to repay them or not, and how you account for them is different therein. Clearly, your debt balance has gone up by threefold to £39 million. Are you likely to recover all of it? So what is the recoverability of that debt? That's an audit risk. So our audit plan reflects the current environment in which you're financially reporting under. I can go into any of the detailed risks afterwards, but I think that colour combination for you highlights where we're focusing based on kind of some of the narrative that's in both the forward and as Hannah presented. Moving to value for money on page 256 to 258 of your pack. The requirements for all auditors have changed in the audit year 2021. So we no longer give a positive value for money conclusion, which you used to. We now report by exception if your arrangements are not adequate. So that's a slight nuance change. But in order to get there, we have to do a risk assessment, put out where we think there are risks to us having to report by exception. And then we will have to report a commentary later in the audit about how we have come to the conclusion about whether there are risks or not, which should be played to you a little bit like your annual government statement, what policies and procedures you've got in place, and therefore what the council is doing to address all of those areas. Audit fees, always of interest to this committee, that's set out on page 276. Again, exactly the same basis as we had for 2019-20 at this stage of the audit. And as you say, in previous agenda items, we're planning to commence the audit on the 15th of November with a conclusion just before Christmas, and therefore report to the January committee as the schedule. So that's the overview, but happy to take any detailed questions members would have.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for introducing that. I'll throw it open to members. Councillor Driver, please. I'll let you have anyone got any comments at this point? Shall I kick it off for a second? Thanks, Mark. It's as good as ever, and lays out what you do. Things of note that are interesting me. Inappropriate capitalisation of revenue expenditure. So I'm looking at section 1, page 237, and overview of the audit strategy. That's something that always kind of irks away at me in the background of my mind. I'm not questioning the integrity or ability of our officers, but it's about that assurance that we get from external audit that you know, that we are, you know, we're not using revenue for capital, you know, we're not trying to, kind of move the money around. Accounting adjustments made in the movement in the reserves statement, and again, you know that is a fraud risk, and again, it's getting that assurance. So I think that's really important. Valuation of investment property, you know, again, that's really important. You know, we've got a large investment portfolio, and we need to know that those figures that MPS actually provide us are accurate, and that's been sort of spot checked, and because it is such a large part of our value as a council, and obviously property, plant and equipment. I mean, that was, I don't know, it was like 900 million or so. I was looking at it, so a ridiculous figure. So you know that, you know, even 1% swing in that is tremendous amounts of money. So again, knowing that those were, we've obviously got the group accounts. And it's proven from Hannah earlier, showing that they've already kind of consolidated the new company, although it's obviously trading that year per se, so it's up and ready and running for when we're back here next year, doing the accounts again. The going concern assessment and disclosure. I mean, again, it's not to cast aspersions about our officers, but that again, getting that assurance that we can fulfill our duties, that we can make it out. It's a really important part of what the marketing does. So I think on 241, I'll point out scale fees has not kept pace with the changing requirements of external audit, with increased focus on, for example, valuations of land and buildings, auditing of groups, valuation of pension obligations, the introduction of new accounting standards, such as going concern disclosure in recent years, as well as the expansion of factors impacting the value for money conclusion. And I think it's a good explanation on the value for money section. So I might see if Councillor Driver does have any points on fees, but I do think that it's a very difficult situation, because I do think it has the work and the onus on external audit to, as Mark kind of said, almost tongue in cheek, you know, I don't believe the figures at all at the moment. That's exactly the approach he has to take, and so he has to sort of rigorously use his analytical tooling and checks and questioning and conversation to give us that robust assurance at the end. So, you know, I mean, the fees, you know, there's a lot of skill that goes into the work to support us at external audit. The Councillor Driver.
No, I think it's a good report once more. Fees, I've always asked, do you have enough money to do the job properly, correct? Are our resources enough there to hold the way that you have to give a report at the end of the year, or do it into it? You know, something?
So the audit fee table that we have on page 276,000.
But as you, I don't believe it's the front answers for, say, change.
Is an appropriate fee to do the audit work, to issue an audit opinion based on the risks in that plan. Clearly, if going through the audit of the financial statements, there are errors in it, or there are risks elsewhere that require extra work, and clearly additional work is needed to get to a position where they on hand make an argument whether they want to adjust for those or not, or report them to you. But based on the risk in that plan, that fee is the right fee to do an audit of your size and complexity with that level of risk.
I think you put it fairly, and I would also say that obviously we formed an opinion last year on this, and we did write to the Secretary of State and myself around the fee setting issues, and obviously the BSAA did a final ruling or whatever on fees, but I think it wouldn't be fair of me not to say that I think it would be a frustration of, you know, of this committee, and I'm sure it must be a frustration of officers that we're still getting the statement accounts out, you know, earlier, you know, by this date, by the end of July and stuff. But it feels that it feels to me that you are under extreme pressure to deliver external audits for local authorities, because it feels like the timeline is slipping, and we are now not looking until November, December before we have our accounts audited and we are all signed off, and we're going to be going into budget setting time. Officers are going to be busy, working with the administration, and so I think it's only fair to ask you to explain why not just the process of how you've done the accounts, but why are there delays, these inherent delays, becoming more prevalent over the years?
It's a good question, and I do share your frustration, because I have all my audit opinions done by the due date. But we are operating in a sector where public sector audit system is fundamentally broken. That has been reported in the Revenue Review, it's been reported to the Public Accounts Committee, and is the subject of at least 2 NHCLG reviews and reports. The fee point is probably the place to start. So the fees were set a number of years ago at a level that was too low to sustain audit quality. You then have a deadline that is artificially very early to meet an arbitrary deadline of submitting accounts before parliamentary recess. 2 together place a huge burden on the audit sector. You can't therefore get through all the work because there aren't sufficient days in the year to do it in that time frame. You then have audits that overrun, that push back the start date of the subsequent year, and then you have a COVID pandemic. So we're in a arguably the worst perfect storm you've ever had. But 53% of audits weren't signed off by the publication deadline back last year. So that means 53% of clients weren't ready for their audit, which required extra time, which has not yet been caught up. We are still signing 2019-20 audits. So our start, which was meant to be February, March, hasn't been till now. So we're playing catch up. So we have, out of the Cambridge office, come up with a phased plan to deliver all our audits to get back on track for next year. So you are late in the phase, but the promise to Annabelle and Hannah is we come and we do our audit in the 5 or 6 week window, start to finish. It happens to be at the back end of the timeline, not the front end of the timeline, but hopefully that will minimise their responsibility for supporting the audit, as you say, in the budget sector. I can apologise, but I can't change the world in what's happened. But hopefully, this plan is back on a more even keel for next year.
But yeah, I'll let you comment. I think that's a fair point. First of all, I've worked with yourself now over the last few years, and I really appreciate your professional approach and your skills when doing our external audit. And so you're not allowed to take early retirement, when COVID's over. But it almost feels like we're kind of being punished for being, pretty reliable in the, and being pushed to the back end of it. And so I just want to say that. But what I would also say is I hope that, it's quite alarming to hear that 53% weren't ready, that were still signing off from the year before, and it sounds like there's a tremendous pressure in this year to catch up. So I hope that works, because we don't want to be here in another year's time, and you're in Barbados or something, and had enough of it. So I hope the phased plan from the Cambridge office works for you this year, and I hope that other authorities can be as efficient as our team, so that when you come in, you can get it signed up and get it done to that level of assurance that we want to achieve. I'll let Councillor Driver in at this point.
But then I was going to say,
Sorry. Oh, sorry.
But that's fine. I mentioned it last year before we keep punishing what's happening under the parties, especially in Norwich. Every single party in Norwich is Tory control, and no one got all the ready, so that put us pressure under us to get ours done first. But can I ask, mate, you've got a plan, you said you had a plan to change to sort all these out, which is great, you've got a plan. and you put us into the back bit. Did you do that on alphabetical order, or are we quite good and before you could just walk in there and tick us all? So that would be good if we went at the back.
Good question. So there are some audits at both the front and the back that should be quick and easy to do without any issues. There are some at the back that have had problems in the past and shouldn't be at the front. But it has been equally based on when we can have sufficient resource to do each of the audits in the phase, so it's numeric equal across all of the phases. But there was an offer to all section 151s when we issued the plan in February that if they didn't like the phase they were in, they could swap with a friend somewhere else, or before we know avoid they should go earlier. And there wasn't a lot of uptake on either of the options, I have to say. So we did make the offer, but clearly we're working in a constrained set of situations for both ourselves and indeed for council. So it is what it is.
I think that's a fair point. You know, quite revealing. We need to get more friendly with our district councils. Yeah. So yeah, Councillor Giles.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate a lot of this is above your head, Mark, but obviously as councillors we have to try and get value for money for our residents. It's only fair. So obviously the pressures on you are increasing. But we did massively increase our fees last year, as did other local authorities. Why not more external employee by in order to meet those additional pressures? In addition, note 3 to Appendix A says you can't quantify the impact on the additional fee implications because of COVID-19. Well, obviously that's totally vague. Is there a maximum amount beyond which the fees would go up by? Is there a maximum amount by which they come to the committee for consideration? Because it not being able to quantify them at all suggests they could be anything, which from the value of money perspective on behalf of our residents, will have to scrutinise. I appreciate a lot of this is above your head.
That's not quite my head. So last year's fee increase has not been approved by public sector audit appointment yet, so we have not received it. Nor has it been approved for this year, so we have not received it. So I think that answers your first point. So our budget setting is flatline at the moment, and clearly we're paying catch up, as I said, on additional work for last year. Additional fees for this year, it is a vague statement. So in essence, it relates to anything that is read in that summary table that I had on page 237 to 239. They're the new risks that we didn't have last year, where we may have to do additional work this year to get sufficient assurance. Processes, Annabelle will have to agree a fee increase, and that will then be approved by or determined by public sector audit appointments. We have a duty to report it to you as an audit committee. I don't think you have a role to approve it per se. That's Annabelle's role in her statutory responsibilities. And there is no maximum because you have to do sufficient audit work to gain sufficient assurance, or issue audit in that is as much as it takes. For the risks that you have, I'm not anticipating it being a significant amount. But I can't give you a figure or a percentage of the whole.
Annabelle, will come in at that point, or that's Councillor Charles? Sorry, do you want to respond, Councillor?
I just want to give the committee some assurance as well that we meet regularly with Mark and his team. And when they do come across an issue, we talk about how we work through that issue, whether it is something that maybe the council could pick up and do some more work, which mitigates some of the need to do additional audit work. It's something that we do regularly when we're doing audits with external audit. So it is something that we work together on, because there are options that we can do more work internally sometimes that will help that additional fee as it comes about. But at the end of the day, we embrace the external view on what we've done, and we work with our auditors to make sure we get the best outcome, because because we do want our financial statements to be sound. And I think something that, you know, we need to be aware of, that we are constantly managing risks and identifying whether we want to put resources in different areas. And we all have to accept that actually sometimes it is better that we come across a few blips along the way and address those rather than giving you 100% perfect outcome, because the cost associated with that could be higher than actually responding and taking a little bit more of a hit on an audit fee. That's not to say we don't do our best to try and get the best set of accounts to the point at which we submit them for audit, but there is a balance there. We cannot put in the resources we would have done traditionally, and all areas have to give that consideration as to what level, you know, what standards we can achieve. But this council has one of the best outcomes from an audit perspective, and as you know, there are very little changes that we make, but there will always be a first time. But please hold on to that. There have been very little changes that we needed to make post audit, but you do then obviously get a good assurance that we've done our job really well, and actually the audit's been effective, and the fact that that's the outcome that we come to. But we are constantly talking and giving consideration to where's the best place to be there.
Does that answer your question? Want to come back? And then Councillor Driver.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask Mark, the deadline for externally auditing the accounts is January 2022. Can you give an absolute guarantee that won't be extended beyond that date? Is it possible that we won't have them externally audited prior to us setting the budget in February next year? That has to be a concern, given that you said that we're still signing off, you know, 2019-20 accounts.
So the January date is the date we anticipate bringing. The January date is the January audit committee date we anticipate bringing our audit report and bringing them final set of accounts to be approved. That is subject to our audit and addressing all the risks we've been through. If our audit identifies anything that requires any extra testing through the dialogue that we have with the finance team, that is a significant amount of work, and clearly I can't guarantee that we get that committee. But taking into account what Annabelle just told you about the track record of producing robust draft accounts, and my risk being relatively stable from the prior year, albeit with some COVID-related financial reporting impact, and my affirmation that we have a window that we are going to do our audit from start to finish. That's my proposal and confirmation. We should level playing field. No issue.
I think that's as good as an assurance that you can receive. Councillor Driver, followed by Councillor Hayes. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's what Annabelle said is very good. We always work together well and we get things out together. That's a bit on what come in Mark 10, they haven't been paid last year. Why haven't they been paid? I know there was a dispute about the fees called up and stuff, but I don't care who they are. Surely we should pay them and find just a bank and say, you know, if we owe them money, pay up. I mean, what's the point of keeping the fees? We knew what the fees were going to be, or some of the fees were going to be, and that just seemed like if this happened to Mrs. Smith down the road, I mean, she could have been bankrupt. But to see that what's known as a big company, and this is happening everywhere, they're going to be when they forget themselves. So I just want to know this, but I just want to know why we're not actually paying out. That's not got a cabinet decision or head finance. I just think it's unfair, whoever you are, to be paid.
Thank you, Ken.
Pre-audit, I have to be very careful how I answer this one, don't I? But I hope you understand, as part of our value for money and our contractual management, we would only pay in accordance with that agreement that is currently in place. We have the PSAO doing that review for us, and once they come to a conclusion, we'll obviously pay appropriately. We've made some estimations in the accounts to cover our full increase. So I'll give you that assurance as well, that there are resources set aside to meet the audit fees, but fundamentally we need to ensure that we manage the contract in the appropriate way, because our auditors would then challenge us if we weren't managing contracts in an appropriate way. So we're letting those processes work through, and at the point we come to a conclusion, we will obviously pay as soon as we have that contract.
I think that's answered the question there. Councillor Hayes?
Yeah, just on the deadlines and slippage, sort of move back to that again. Obviously, I think we're all hoping that COVID cases will remain low, restrictions will remain out. Yeah, there won't be any further restrictions, but I just want to make sure that obviously you've worked some risk management of the risk, if restrictions increase, you still think we can meet that deadline. Presumably, you also have homework in and everything these days anyway. I just wanted to check, but yeah, if suddenly restrictions start going back again, that we'll still be on pace to meet the November, December.
The timetable that I set out is on the premise that we do our audit remotely. We have to do all the audits in all the phases remotely, irrespective of being allowed back in as of yesterday's announcement. We'd like to come back in where it's appropriate to do so across face-to-face. Audit questions are a lot easier to get answers to them doing it via e-portal, but the e-portal that we use with officers was a success last year across the board, so there's no reason why it shouldn't again be used this year, and indeed it won't detriment that time.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Stevie?
Thank you, Chair. Just some reassurance to the council driver. The Ernst & Young revenue in 2020 appears to have gone up to 37.2 billion. So I think they're going to be okay.
Thanks for that point of clarity, Councillor. So are there any other views on Mark's plan for the external audit coming up? No, okay, just a couple of bits, but I think we've covered a lot of it, but a lot, you've got page 248, the valuation of investment property, and consider the work that performed by the council's valuer, yes, including the adequacy of the scope of the work performed, the professional capabilities and the results of their work, and sample test key asset information used by the valuer. So I think that's all really important work that you need to go and do. Consider the work again for the valuation fund and property equipment as well. Again, check those values. We saw a bit of that last year as well. Just moving forward, you've got the group accounts on page 252 as an inherent risk, and so you review the group assessment prepared by the council, ensuring that accounting framework and accounting policies are aligned to the Norwich City Council group, and scoping audit requirements for NLL based on their significance to the group account, and liaise with us to ensure that we're doing it. So obviously we don't get the audited accounts here at Audit for our arm's length company, but that audit is then obviously checked and we receive an assurance for external audit. So an important element of that. The going concern, I mean, to me, before last year, I know that we've had financial challenges, but only really this financial year did I ever really consider that was even remotely a realistic possibility. I think you had focused on it. I think there's a couple of areas here, and you close on page 253. We will discuss the detailed implications of the revised auditing standard with finance staff shortly, and seek to agree with management to receive an early draft of the council's going concern assessment in advance of the 2021 year-end audit, in order to provide management with feedback on the adequacy and sufficiency of the proposed disclosures in relation to going concern. So I assume that conversation has happened, and not yet. Mark?
It's happened to the extent that last year we had a very detailed discussion and a note in this draft accounts on the same premise, and we just need to update our knowledge of management assessment. So we haven't had a detailed discussion today, but it's part of the process.
thank you for that point of clarity. Auditing, accounting, estimates. Yeah, again, it's that, it's quite an interesting bit in 254. Changes to the standard may affect the nature and extent of information that we may request and will likely increase the level of audit work required, particularly in cases where an accounting estimate and related disclosures are higher on the spectrum of inherent risk, for example. I think it's quite interesting. I mean, we were talking about that, the revised ISA proposals, and to challenge it is important, and to see how you've laid out how you're going to challenge and seek that information is important, and it is another example of how your work is changing in the approach to external audit as well for us. Interesting. Sort of into the value for money stuff here. Just looking at, consider whether there is evidence to suggest that there are significant weaknesses in arrangements. That the National Audit Office guidance is clear that the assessment of what constitutes a significant weakness and the amount of additional audit work required to adequately respond to the risk of a significant weakness in arrangement is a matter for professional judgment. However, the NAO states that a weakness may be said to be significant if it could reasonably be expected to expose the council to significant financial loss or risk, leads to significant impact on the quality or effectiveness of the service or on the council's reputation. I think that's a really important point, that one, because we are under pressure to deliver services, and some of our investments, some of the risks that are associated with running a local authority do put our reputation at risk as well. So it's interesting to hear that that you're considering that point as well in your work. So I think that's all I would say on it. I mean, we've got the scope of the group audit there, and we make it quite clear that we're working with the external auditors on that, and how we'll do that. We've got a specific scope audit within our realm in there as well. So I think that the work that you're looking to deliver here should give this committee a really good level of assurance when it is completed. Obviously, it's a challenging year to do that. It's shows a really good positive working relationship between our officers and yourselves to be able to deliver that in the time frame, and it's a comprehensive piece of work which the committee should take assurance from. So we look forward to seeing the delivery of that mark as soon as possible by January. Great. Okay. Thank you. Any other comments?
Sorry, as I was last minute substitution, I'm going to have to disappear because I have other engagements. Sorry about that.
That's quite all right. Thank you. So we'll let Councillor McAllister leave the end of this item. Thank you very much for attending. So we just to check what we actually do. We just note that we agreed to check. Right, the reviews the attached report. We've done so. Considers and agrees the approach and scope of the external audit as proposed in the audit plan. Well, I think we conclusively agree with that. So thank you, Mark. So we'll move on to item 10, which is the draft annual report of the audit committee. I'll just take a second here. This is obviously being drawn up in conjunction with myself and Councillor Driver. I think it's a really good reflection of some of the positive work we've done last year. I'm happy to put that to the committee as is. I'm happy to accept any comments, but if not, we can agree that as it is. So, any comments from the committee? Yep, so we're recommending that we take that to council. Yeah, agreed? Excellent. Okay, so that's item 10. And so that